I'm Chap Bettis, and you're listening to The Disciple Making Parent, where we seek to equip parents and churches to pass the gospel to their children. How important is the local church in your life? And when you think of your church, what metaphors come to mind? Is one of the first ones the household of God? And for that matter, what does leadership in the home have to do with leadership in the church? Hi, my name is Chap Bettis, and I'm the author of The Disciple Making Parent. And in today's podcast, we're going to be talking with Alexander Strauch about two households, your household and also the household of God, God's household, and the overlap between the two. Well, Alexander Strauch is well known for his book, Biblical Eldership. It was published over 30 years ago and has influenced many people to start thinking about the role of biblical shepherds or elders. It was influential in my own life years ago. And he's continued to be a prolific author and many other works, including two that we mentioned in the interview, Equal Yet Different, and The Hospitality Commands. He served faithfully as an elder in his own church before stepping down 10 years ago. And he's been married for 53 years and has 4 children and now 15 grandchildren. So it was a true joy to talk with him over Zoom. Well, before we start, I want to remind you that we give away the audiobook of The Disciple Making Parent absolutely free. So we are on a mission to equip parents to pass the gospel to their children. And the Disciple Making Parent is the centerpiece of our ministry. It's been endorsed by Al Mohler, Tim Challies, among others. You can have the audiobook for free. Simply email audiobook@theapollosproject.com. That's audiobook@theapollosproject.com, letting us know you heard about the offer on the podcast, and we're going to send you the audiobook absolutely free. But for now, let's listen to my conversation with Alexander Strauch about your household, the household of God, and its leaders. Well, it's a joy to have on the Disciple Making podcast, Alex Strauch, and it's just such a privilege to talk with him. He's the author of numerous books, and we'll be talking about how they've influenced me and others as well. He's been married 52 years. He's got 4 children, 15 grandchildren, and now retired from being an elder and doing the ministry full time. So welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Good to see you, dear brother.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about your ministry and tell people about it if they haven't heard. And we can talk about your popular book, Biblical Eldership. I'm going to hold this up for the YouTube video. This is my copy from 1995. It is well highlighted. It is well, poured over. Just really, really was helpful as a young pastor. 92, 30. And so it was just such a help. So just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your ministry and the book and testimonies that you've received back from that.
Well, thank you. I've been at Littleton Bible Chapel for 51 or 52 years. I've been a part of the leadership and the teaching of the ministry. Although I retired officially from being a pastor elder 10 years ago, I'm still very involved in the church and trying to plant other churches out of our church. Just planted one 3 years ago. It's doing very, very well. And I went with that church plant to help. My main ministry now is writing, and I travel and speak and then work in our local church. So basically it keeps me out of trouble.
We'll talk a little bit about the book, Biblical Eldership. You wrote that years ago.
Yes, it's over 30 years old.
And it's had quite an influence. What prompted you to write it? And what are some testimonies?
Yes, what prompted me to write it was the absolute and total confusion over this subject. By the way, the same is true of deacons. And I had looked through many books because I was given a series at our church on the church, ecclesiology, and I got to the church governance, and I read so many things. Most of it's from a denominational background, and they defend denominational polity, which of course is understandable. However, I didn't find one single book that exegeted or expounded all the passages. And that's what started me thinking. I had in seminary seen how they just outright rejected any kind of plurality of leadership. It was almost like heresy, but I saw it in the Bible very clearly, and I couldn't see anything about the ordained clergy. So that really started my interest. Something's up here. So anyway, after doing this series and not being able to find any exegetical books, I said, well, no one else is doing it. I could do it. And the Lord put a flame in my heart. And my original thought was to build or to write a book that would literally take you through every single passage on this topic, keep my ideas, my practices totally out of the book. And I think that's what made it successful. It's an exegetical work. It's really a biblical theology. And people that love the Bible have to admit, boy, this is pretty clear what the Bible says. And then we have a workbook with it, and we have a website that has become very popular, biblicaeldership.com. We have the School of the Shepherds on that. So that's probably going to be my lifelong work.
Well, it served me so well years ago as a young elder in the church, and I think it actually relates a lot as well to parenting, as we're going to talk about the church as a household and just the need for spiritual fathers. But let's just start with some basics here and talk about what are the words used for congregational leadership in the New Testament. How do they give us a full picture of what a leader should be? And then we're going to transition and think about how that applies to the home as well. But let's just start, because there's all sorts of denominations out there with all sorts of different labels for leaders of their denomination.
Well, you really have to start with Matthew 23. Jesus is comparing his followers to the present day Pharisees, religious leaders, and leaders of the Gentiles. There's about 5 passages in the gospel where Jesus shows this contrast between his style of leadership and the normal, typical rule down from the pyramid, top of the pyramid, the apex of the pyramid, rule down on the people. Jesus actually forbid that. And in Matthew 23, he says, I don't want you to be like the Pharisees. Don't go around in special garments. Don't be having special titles for yourself, chief seeds. And he says, you are brothers. So let me give you 4 things that come out of those 4 or 5 stories, including washing the disciples' feet. 4 key words. All right, are you ready for it? Humility, servanthood, brotherly equality, and Christ-like love. 4 key words that supersaturate the New Testament epistles. So Jesus specifically said, you are not to be like the kings of the Gentiles. You are not to be like the rulers, the religious rulers, who are all consumed with themselves and with titles and special clothes and all of that. So when you come to the gospel, from the gospels to the epistles and the book of Acts, you see none of those drapings among God's people. And it's a people's movement. And so the terms used are elder, which comes out of the Old Testament over 100 times. People think this is a new radical idea. They haven't read their Old Testament. Israel was a great family, and it was led by its elders, community elders, and its priests. And the other word is episkopos, which is overseer. There's actually another word, steward, 1 Timothy Titus 1:7. These are the terms used. They do not have a special religious meaning. They're actually very common terms. And what we see in the New Testament, and I don't see how you can't see it, is a plurality of elders, a plurality of overseers, a plurality of stewards. It's just right through the whole New Testament. 2 key verses, Acts 20:28, 1 Peter 5:1 and 2. Both Peter and Paul, 2 of the preeminent apostles, give to the elders of the church the duty to shepherd the church of God. To no other person or group do we have the two great apostles giving the pastoral oversight of the church, but to the elders or overseers of the church. And again, a lot of this really is following Jesus' teaching. You are not to be like the kings and the rulers of this world. They love to rule down, They want to be at the top of the pyramid and the people are below. So it's a different style of leadership. We call it servant leadership. I think it's a good term. And it's brotherly leadership. And all of this comes back to your topic, the church is the family. And I don't know if you've read any of Joe Hellerman's books. Oh, he has two excellent books. This was his PhD. Did his PhD at UCLA on the city of Philippi. And he shows you what leadership was in the Greco-Roman world at Philippi. And then he compares it to the book of Philippians, and the comparison is total. It's an unbelievable book. And I would highly recommend Joe's two books. Now, his second book was When the Church Was a Family. Lots and lots of information on the whole concept of family in the Greco-Roman world. And then he compares it to the New Testament or the Christian family. These are exquisite works. I recommend them all the time. And in fact, I've given lots of Joe's books out.
That's great. It makes me want to. That makes me want to go and read that. And I appreciated what you said. So the idea of older, so someone who spiritually mature, and then also overseeing. So we're to oversee, and then in that passage in Acts 20, he says shepherd the flock, and that's what also in 1 Peter, right? Shepherd the flock.
Yes. Although the two words are used interchangeably, they don't act the same meaning. Elder emphasizes dignity, wisdom, experience, community leader. Overseer emphasizes function. They watch over. They're guardians, protectors, superintendents. So although the words are used interchangeably, which is pretty much agreed upon most people, they have a different nuance, each one.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, I could sit and talk with you about church all day, but let's think about specifically about the family and talk a little bit about the church, both as the household of God, and then thinking about how that even men should be the spiritual leaders of their home.
Yes, well, there is a complete interconnection between the individual family, which Al Mohler calls the natural family. We usually use the term nuclear, but the natural family, a man, a woman, and children, and it could be a mother-in-law or parents in the family. That is the family by the biblical standards. The local church is an extended family. That's why it's called the household of God, 1 Timothy 3:15. And the individual family is to support the larger family, which is the local household of God, church. And then the larger family is to support and care for the individual family. That's why it's so important for every family to be a part of the local church. Because if you have great troubles in your family, the local church is there, the local extended family is there to support you and help you. I think of how many women are deserted by their husbands. Well, I think of the different women in our church. We help them financially. We help them with providing fathers and taking them on trips, the children. And so the larger family cares for the smaller family, and the smaller family, the individual family supports them. Totally integrated. And that's why when you go through the New Testament, brother and sister is used over 250 times. We are brothers and sisters to one another. And by the way, I might want to comment, that's real brothers and sisters. Not blood brothers and sisters, not DNA brothers and sisters, but Holy Spirit brothers and sisters. Every believer has the indwelling, empowering presence of the Holy Spirit, And the Holy Spirit connects us together. It's real, not just a metaphor. We are really connected together, and together we're all connected to Christ, our head. So this is a real family, and I have to say this, it's an eternal family. So my mother, my father, my brother, they're all dead. I have no DNA family left, but I have a large eternal family. We are all connected by the Spirit of the living God, and we'll be together for eternity in God's home.
That's really helpful because I think even today there's a emphasis, such an emphasis on the natural family, the biological family, and parents can get so caught up in that. You never have done enough for your children. There's always one more sports activity. There's always one more skill they could learn. So to actually say, no, this is your natural family that needs to be connected with your eternal family. That's really helpful. And that as our families are living for something greater than them. So that's just vitally.
Well, in raising our 4 children, I have to tell you, we did not raise them just as mom and dad, but as a whole church. The elders in our church, our kids call uncle and aunt uncle. And still to this day, the retired ones, they just love them. And all the other young people in our church, which my children, which are in the mid to late 40s, those kids, they grew up in the church, are still their lifelong friends, and their children are all friends today. We have actually a very unique situation. We've had 3 generations of elders. No one ever left the church. The first generation's all dead, but they were all there. I'm the second generation. We're all there to help. And we have a 3rd generation of elders that are leading the church and doing a great job. And so we have perpetuated a real family church. And much of, I don't think this is wrong. I think it's a right that many of the young people have found their spouses in our church and grew up together. And you think of Israel, a great family. And they were not to marry outside the nation. It was forbidden by the Lord. So it's a wonderful thing for the people of God to find their spouses in the local church, even if it's not your own local church, another good Christian local church. That's why camps and bigger activities with other churches is a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. That's just really helpful. Well, one of the qualities for an elder and deacon is that they manage their household well. Let me read this. This is 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 4. He must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he take care for God's church? And then for deacons, it says, let the deacons each be the husband of one wife, managing their children and their households well. What would you help us understand that passage? I was just talking to a pastor this week, and I said to him, would you say you manage your household well? And he said, oh, I hope so. What do you think Paul is saying there, and why is it important? And of course, Titus begins with the qualities in the family first. And I wonder how our thinking would be different if Titus came in our Bibles before Timothy. So what's your understanding of that passage?
Well, what it tells me is that conducting a church, leading a church is more like leading a family than leading the military or a corporation. And so Paul is concerned. And remember what Peter says, 1 Peter 5:3, do not lord it over those in your charge, but be an example. Elders are examples of the Christian life. So when he says an elder, overseer must be above reproach, the very first thing he says is, in specific terms, husband of one wife or faithful to your wife. That's the first specific qualification ever, the overarching one, above reproach. In other words, the church is a family. And how can we have leaders who have broken families, divorce situations, or adulterous situation in any way with credibility lead the church? So first thing Paul is concerned about is the marriage. It's got to be above reproach. Then, as you said, Titus, that comes earlier, the family. Because the church is a family, if you've got a discombobulated family, dysfunctional family coming apart at the seams, I simply don't know how you would be an example to God's people. You would be actually a disgrace. You'd be an offense to the church. So in the eyes of the apostle who really knows what the church is, the leaders have to be exemplary in the area of marriage and their family, that they show that they can read it. Because how can you? The logic is you can't run your own family if it's falling apart. How can you run the family of God? You can't.
I agree. And what you're highlighting is that the dynamics are different. For example, I had one business leader tell me, and his company was probably $20 million, but he said, it's actually harder to raise my 3 children than it is to run my company.
I believe that.
Because when you're as a CEO, when you say you will work late, everybody says, yes, sir. They work late because their paycheck is dependent upon it. But when, you say that to your 15-year-old teenage girl, she might not say, yes, sir. And so it's much more relationally intense,
Absolutely.
persuasive, and all those things you talked about before, which is example, which is humility,
servanthood,
love, just all those things that bring over to the home, so you can dislike your boss at work, still obey him, obey her, and they can get results. But that just doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in the home. It may happen, as I'm sure you know, there may be a while where the family is sort of submitting, but when those children get teenagers, it's going to come out that there hasn't been love in the home. Yeah. So it's just a completely different dynamic.
Totally. Isn't it interesting? I have to read all these books on leadership. I never read them all the way. I read the front, the back, get some things. It's too boring. But I see very little emphasis on the style of leadership is more like fathering than a CEO, which I guess, all these people talking about the Carver model, the CEO model, the policy model. None of that is New Testament. I don't know why they just don't trust their New Testament that we get God's guidance on these subjects.
Well, I've been thinking about even how that plays out in larger churches and needing to multiply spiritual fathers and spiritual mothers. And my experience has been in smaller churches, but as I interact now with larger churches, I realized that there was a dynamic in our smaller church. It's the family dynamic, and don't give me too much trouble on the phrase I'm going to use, but there's a godly coercion that happens in a smaller church where you can, out of love, go up to a young guy and hey, you should be at that conference, or you should you should do this or whatever, because it's out of love, and it's spiritual fathers who are persuading. So maybe that's a better word, godly persuasion, as opposed to that family dynamic. I think is harder to recreate larger churches. Well, what does Titus 1:6 seems to say? That I'm wondering, seems to say that if a father does not have believing children, he should step down. And I love how you explained it on your website on biblical eldership. I went and listened to that before. If anyone is above reproach, the husband of one wife, and his children are believers, not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. What's your understanding of that passage, and what's the encouragement to us as dads?
Well, I've written on it at several levels, more scholarly level, a more popular level, and there is real disagreement over that passage. And the disagreement comes largely over the word pistos. Does it mean faithful, reliable, or does it mean believer? It can mean either one of those, depending on context. So, in contrast to pistos, you have not, you have debauchery, insubordination, very strong terms. So, without going into a lot of detail, I think the contrast helps us to understand he's not simply talking about a believing child. He's talking about a child that's totally out of control, and probably not a child. He's talking about someone at least teenage years that is a disgrace to the parents and to the Christian faith. So I take it, and I notice more modern commentators say it, to be he's contrasting the child who obeys the parents, faithful to the parents, and the child who's like the prodigal son. Now, there's another issue that's theological. It's an impossible demand, and it can cause terrible hypocrisy, because any Christian father can say, oh, all my children have professed faith. Of course, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, all profess faith. I've never heard of a child in the Christian home that hasn't professed faith. You want to be with dad and mom in heaven, or you want to go to hell with the devil? What? I'm going to heaven, I'll tell you that. So they make professions. We don't really know the reality of those until later. Now, that's just the way it is. Some kids keep their profession all their life, no problem. But I have seen in our church, and I've talked to many, many people, you get kids at 18, they leave for college, they leave for the service. I saw this in my own growing up days with dear friends. That's when they turn away from the Lord. Now, a little bit of side trail here. 4 or 5 young men I grew up with as teenagers at camp in church. At 18, my closest friend went into the military and didn't come back to the Lord, or really was saved in his late 50s as a result of cancer. 2 others went into debauchery, just as you read there. Drunkenness, ruined marriages, horrible lives, drunken lives. In their 50s, they came to Christ. In fact, it was thrilling. One day, one called me and said, Alex, do you think I could be saved? I've rejected the Lord all my life. I said, of course you can be. The thief on the cross is an example. So when a person comes to Christ, 5 years old, 20 years old, 50 years, that's not in our hands. Now, you deal with family matters. We can't control all these things. A parent thinks he can control all these things, and for a real surprise. We teach the gospel, we model the gospel, we build strong relationships with our children, we're approachable, we do all the right skillful things. They may even be our friends, they may love us, but they just don't believe. So I think it's an impossible demand. And what happens is it turns into hypocrisy where the parents say, oh, no, they're saved. They were saved when they're 5 and 6 and baptized at 11. They'll come back to the Lord when maybe they've never really been saved. So I just think it's very dangerous. And I do know a church that if your children aren't saved by 18 or a professing believer, you can't be an elder. I do know it, actual church. You might even know it too. Well, I think that produces a terrible hypocrisy and a very dangerous things, false professions.
And probably also pressure, this weird pressure on the child. My dad's going to have to step down public.
Oh, boy.
There's all this weird thing. So thank you. That's
dangerous.
I appreciate that. I agree with that. I've said it this way when I've done do seminars. Our children's salvation is by faith, not by works, not by their works, and not by our works. So there's really nothing, in a sense, even as we're faithful. You just talked about being faithful, but we can't do enough that they're going to follow Christ, and that's yes, I would agree. That would be really an impossible
demand
on that.
And, some children are saved at 18 or 19 or early 20s or in college. So we're forced to put an age on it so we can get credibility to become an elder. So the whole thing becomes, in Bible interpretation, if your interpretation leads to all kinds of complex hornetness of problems, you better reconsider that interpretation. And this interpretation leads to unsolvable problems and creates an atmosphere that I think is very destructive personally.
I agree. Well, let's talk talk to dads. You've got 4 children, you've got 15 grandchildren. Talk to dads. What would you say to them? The ministry is the disciple making parent. We want to do all that we can to pass the gospel to their kids. Given the world that we're in today, and I've got to believe as a grandfather, and I just think as I get older, it distresses me more and more. What are some exhortations that you would give if you could sit down with fathers and say, listen, these things are important?
Okay, a couple of key words. First one is relationship. Little children have to do what you say. You can spank them. You can be a spirit-crushing giant and get them to do whatever you want. Be little monkeys. But that's different than building a relationship where you enjoy being with one another. Your children enjoy you and want to be with you. So I have 4 children. They're all adults today. And they love being with us. They love going to dinner with us and coming over our house all the time. We're very, very close. The other word is approachable. You want to be approachable. So your kids start the teen years, tween years. They're going to hear curse words at school. They're going to hear a lot of things today that didn't even exist when I was in high school or junior high. It didn't exist. They're all seeing pornography with their friends. Put it right in your face. We let our children know, you're going to hear these words. What do these words mean? You're going to hear about sex and all. You come to us. We're not going to bawl you out or anything. We're going to explain these things to you. If you get pregnant, we have 4 daughters. This can happen to good girls. A moment of passion and craziness. You come to us. Do not go to your friends. They don't know anything. So we've always been very approachable parents. They feel very comfortable. We're not harsh. I never yelled at my children. And even in discipline, we're very, very cautious with discipline. Each child is completely different. Some respond to spanking, some that makes them angry. You do much better just sitting and reasoning, talking with them. So we were very approachable with the children. Then we know from Ephesians that, particularly fathers, we must be teaching fathers. In other words, the Deuteronomy 6 passage, we have all these situations in life. We're getting all ready to go to bed. We get up in the morning. Everyone's got to get out to school, or even worse, get out to church Sunday morning with 5 women getting through one bathroom. Oh, I'll tell you, that's a test of your sanctification right there. I always got ready the night before. But anyway, in those normal life, you're really teaching, and you're modeling for them the Christian life, and they should know doctrine. They should know the Bible. And so one thing we did as parents, 95% successful, is that we always ate dinner together at night. And during that time, I tried to always engage, even when they were little. And I found little kids love questions. I ask them questions and talk about what's going on in the political world, the religious world, and then have a little study together. When they were little, it was just, 5 minutes or less. As they got older, we went through the book of Revelation, the book of Proverbs. I played a test walking through the whole Bible with the Bible characters. And so they've grown up, and then I would pray for each child every night. So they grew up seeing their father, pray for them every night, teach them. So you want to be a teaching parent, not a bully, but someone who just very naturally, you're in the car together and you say, boy, aren't you thankful to the Lord for this wonderful car we have? It hasn't broken down in 2 months. It's such a wonderful thing. And then you pull up to the house and you say, oh, the Lord has given us such a wonderful, warm house, and it's 20 below zero. So anyway, you're just all the time a teacher, all the time, a consummate teacher. And that's what Deuteronomy 6. In the normal flow of life, you are not only teaching, but living it. Boy, you better live it, not just have a bunch of empty words. The kids hate your guts. That's all counterproductive. So you've got to live what you say. Your children can't say you're a hypocrite, and they know. They live with you. They know if there's the two different people, the one guy in church who's friendly with everyone, and the one guy at home who neglects them. So those are some basic things, but building relationships is so important. Rules and regulations only take you so far. Now, I told you about these friends of mine. We grew up together. In two of the cases, two of the brothers, they're both dead now, but did come to Christ. They had a father that preached a lot, but was a very cold father who didn't communicate, had no warmth. Everything they did was wrong and sinful. They wouldn't have a television or newspaper. I mean, they had rules and regulations. Took a year to get to know all the rules and regulations. The father, a big voice at church and a big speaker, and go out and witness in the park verbally. But they didn't like their father. They couldn't wait. Every one of them got out of the home actually before 18. So he had a big profession. I think he was sincere, but he didn't understand children at all. Children aren't robots. And they're not just going to do what you say, and you all of a sudden find out they have their own will, and that will has to be skillfully dealt with, not beaten. So there's a heavy price to pay for heavy-handed, highly controlling discipline in the home.
That's good. That's really good. Just a number of those things, whether it's the relationship, the affection. Yeah, and not being heavy-handed. I think that's the thing that surprises you, at least it did me, was if you have structure and order for young children, you're like, oh, I had this thing down, and then of course they grow up, which you want them to do, and it becomes a lot more complex, and that's great because you want them to be individuals and on their own, but you also want, okay, we need to talk about things a lot more. So especially being a teacher.
Well, in this approachable thing, I would put with approachable fairness. So you made a discipline. They came in late. They're 16, 17. They came in real late, way beyond what they're supposed to. And so you have this heavy discipline. You're not going to drive your car. You're not going to be doing this now for the next couple of weeks. And they appeal to you. Oh, that's too harsh, Dad. We got this and that. And can you be fair and say, okay, let's work out some other deal. They feel a sense of reasonableness. That's a good word. So there was a missionary. He had 3 children. He was a very rigid missionary. I knew him. I knew his wife very well. His wife wasn't this way. And he drove all 3 girls out of the home with all his rules and regulations and this very fanatical, rigid life. So anyway, on his deathbed, one of the girls, well, 2 of them come to our church today. On his deathbed, he said to his daughters, I've been an unreasonable man. Wow, what a confession. I've been an unreasonable man. Well, what a price he paid, the kids paid. Don't be an unreasonable father. Do you have to change your discipline? Or if the kids say, Dad, that's really not fair. I don't like, okay, what else can we do together? Let them know they got a voice.
Wow. I don't know, man, that just is making me tear up, because that is the last thing you want to have on your deathbed. You want to be surrounded by family and loved ones, but to confess sin like that. Well, talk a little bit before we hit record. You told me a little bit, prolific author, but let's highlight 2 resources, equal yet different, in the hospitality command. So talk a little bit about those, why you wrote those. And
yes, we noticed our young people coming back from Christian colleges, feminists, and mad at us because they said we didn't teach the right thing about men and women. And so we've got these huge tomes, a biblical man and woman, what is that? 400 to 500 pages a lot of technical material. They're never going to read that. We needed at this time, I think I wrote this 20 years ago, we needed a book for high schoolers and college students. And I did this book equally yet different, but look at the subtitle, A Brief Study of the Biblical Passages on Gender. So I take them through every passage and the major arguments, starting with Jesus Christ himself, going back all the way to Genesis 2 and 3. Brief, I put it in a story-like manner, easy to read. A Counsel for Biblical Manhood and Woman uses this book. And another one, a major part of our ministry, I think it's helped our children, is our hospitality ministry. My wife loves that, and we still carry it on. But when our children were small, those 4 girls learned hospitality. And so I wrote this little booklet, The Hospitality Commands. There are 5 commands to hospitality. And then the subtitle is Building Loving Christian Community and Building Bridges to Friends and Neighbors. Again, I take you through all the passages, how hospitality builds community. And you know, in our hospitality, we always have other children over. So they're playing with all the other children. They get to know other children, love other children. Makes it a fun day for them on Sunday. Sunday was usually our big day. We had, of course, other times, but we always had people over on Sunday after church. And for the children, it was a lot of fun. And if we missed it, what's wrong, Daddy? You backslidden or something? We didn't have any people over today. I said, no, I'm okay.
Well, that's great because the hospitality is a way to minister to all sorts of people. So other families, singles, older, younger, but the family is involved. And so that was always as in the preparation on Saturday, we would get our kids involved. And so it was a way to serve together
right.
as a family. It's a way to serve the church. It's an easy way. You're doing something all together. Parents now distracted and, divvied up all different ways. This is something we can do together, serve others. So yeah, I think that's an easy win, just to serve. But again, not to harp on the dads, but we have to be willing to have people into our castle. I come home to retreat from the world. And now if I'm actually going to have people in, it's work. Hospitality is work, right? So it's, but it's also service as well.
In raising our 4 daughters, they've seen many missionaries in our home. And when they're in their home, I get them to talk about what the culture's like, the food's like, what the people are like. Very educational for the children.
Yeah. Yeah. We used to, while we were sitting around the table, they would have to ask one question. We prepped them. And so their favorite question was, did you have any pets when you were growing up? So that was okay. Yes, you can listen mostly, but sometimes you do have to interact. So that was good. Well, thank you so much for the time. Where can people find out more about you and your ministry if they want to dig into these books and find out more about training for elders?
Just go to biblicaeldership.com. biblicaeldership.com.
Super. Well, thank you. Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for writing that years ago, your writing ministry and the way you've served the Lord. And so I know it's going to be a blessing for people to listen to this interview. So
well, thanks for having me on because my subject is really totally interrelated with your subject. Let me just give you one more thought. It appears to me the Lord gives his servants a special message, something you're interested in all your life. Yes, we need a lot of other doctrines and things to know, but we always come back to something that's in our heart. So to me, it's been this whole thing of eldership, what it is and how it can bless the church and what elders should be. And it's all interrelated with the family because elders are leaders of the larger family. And it's not a separate issue, really.
I agree 100%. So yeah, that's, thank you for that encouragement. And yeah, being, calling parents and encouraging parents to disciple their kids, especially the culture that we're living in today is definitely on my heart. So thank you. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Disciple Making Parent podcast. For more information about the book, The Disciple Making Parent, visit thedisciplemakingparent.com.